For the longest time, Nintendo has said that its mission is to put smiles on the faces of everyone it touches. It says so on its website and everything. Over the years, Nintendo must have been touching a bunch of lawyers then, because a lot of legal professionals are now a lot richer thanks to the sheer number of lawsuits Nintendo has brought against anyone who gets on their bad side. But while these lawsuits enriched the lawyers prosecuting them, they also robbed us of some incredibly cool, if fantastically illegal, projects based on Nintendo IP. So take a gander at 7 times Nintendo's litigious ways ruined a good time. And if anyone would like a copy of my fan game, Super Andio Brothers, meet me in the alleyway behind the studio. No cops!
If you're not familiar with it, Garry's Mod is a hugely popular sandbox game where the rules are basically do what you want, mate. And in situations like that, the result is almost always, I want to do weird things with characters I don't own. One of the main selling points of Garry's Mod is the way that anyone can create and share their own content for other players to use, including maps, animations, and characters. You can probably see where this is going, and if you can't, then I'm genuinely jealous of your innocence. In the 18 years since it was released, Garry's Mod has seen players importing all manner of IP from other games, including a load of characters and maps from Nintendo franchises like Mario, Zelda, and Splatoon. Since one of the things people use Garry's Mod for is their own animations, it goes without saying that not everyone was making stuff that's as family-friendly as the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Considering it took nearly 2 decades to step in and do something, Nintendo was surprisingly lenient with this one. But eventually it did decide that enough was enough, and Garry's Mod creator Gary Newman, not that one, confirmed in April of this year that Nintendo had requested that all 18 years worth of player-uploaded Nintendo-based content be removed from Garry's Mod. Which means if you always dreamed of creating a movie where Link does a TikTok dance with Mario on Rainbow Road, that dream is now going to have to remain firmly in your head. Which is probably the best place for it, to be fair.
Of all the main Nintendo first-party games, Mario Kart seems like the one it would be most fun to experience in real life. Don't even get me started on Animal Crossing. Those animals would be eating each other within a week. The idea of speeding around bright and colourful backdrops with the friendly cast of the Mario games is so appealing, it's even become a core part of Super Mario Land at the Universal Studios theme parks, where the ride Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge lets parkgoers experience Mario Kart in real life. However, there used to be another way people could experience Mario Kart in real life, and that was through Maricar, a Japanese company who wanted nothing more than to let people play real-life Mario Kart, with specially customized go-karts, costumes, and the additional life-threatening twist of having racers drive along actual busy city roads in the heart of Tokyo, Japan. While Maricar was extremely popular, what it wasn't was actually officially licensed by Nintendo in any way whatsoever. And we know how that goes. That's right, Maricar was on the receiving end of the legal equivalent of a red shell, a lawsuit, by Nintendo. As a result, they rebranded as Street Car and gave their karts new liveries with the words "unrelated to Nintendo" prominently emblazoned on every available surface. You can still rent costumes to race in, but now they're mostly of Marvel superheroes. Because if anyone's going to be cool about someone using their intellectual property, it's Disney. Right, guys? Right?
One group that takes its games seriously, it's the fighting games community, and Smash Bros players are among the most intense. Whether you're talking the hardcore Super Smash Bros melee defenders who think the GameCube version is still the best of the bunch, or the more reasonable types who have decided to get with the times and embrace Super Smash Bros Ultimate on the Switch instead, competitive Smash Bros tournaments are considered very serious business.
Lands the backer, not gonna KO. Light with his tournament on the line, but he illusions way too low, and because of that, Proto Man, I'm gonna take the stock, take the set, continue on in the tournament, and knock Light out at 7th place.
Despite the franchise's popularity, Nintendo has always seemingly tried its best to keep Smash Bros away from the fighting game scene. It tried to ban the EVO 2013 tournament Super Smash Bros Melee Final from being broadcast before the fans kicked off and Nintendo backed down. Smash Bros would then continue to feature at EVO regularly until Nintendo pulled the game from the tournament in 2022, shortly after Sony had bought the rights to EVO. That's okay though, surely? People can just hold their own Smash Bros tournaments without having to attend EVO, can't they? Well, about that. Last year, Nintendo published its Community Tournament Guidelines, which basically said it would shut down any tournaments featuring Nintendo games unless it followed their rules. This included making sure tournaments don't turn a profit, don't have more than 200 competitors, don't offer prize money more than $5,000, and don't use Nintendo's logo or official artwork. So you can have a tournament, but it has to look bad, no one can make any money, it can't have a decent prize, and no one can turn up. Alright, Smash Brothers tournament around my house? Who's in?
Game over? No way! Because we got Game Genie! We tell you when it's over.
With Game Genie, I decide how many lives I get.
I use it when I want to live forever.
Play to the end and win. Maybe I want to start on level 15.
No problemo!
It makes cool games like Street Fighter 2 more exciting.
Less frustrating!
With Game Genie, it ain't over.
So we say it's over. Excellent!
Game Genie for NES, Super NES, Sega Genesis, and Game Boy. Codes from many popular games, each sold separately.
Way back in the early 90s, long before it was owned by EA and known for its racing games, UK studio Codemasters was responsible for a nifty little piece of kit called the Game Genie. The Game Genie would act as a sort of middleman between a cartridge and a console, and would bring up a separate screen that let players enter their own cheat codes. These codes would replace specific values in the game's data, meaning by entering the right password, players could give themselves infinite lives, select which level to start on, play as boss characters, or all manner of game-breaky stuff. Nintendo wasn't too pleased with a bunch of randos fiddling around with its code, so it sued Galoob, the US distributor of Game Genie, claiming it was creating derivative versions of Nintendo games. The court issued an injunction against the sale of Game Genies while they figured things out, and so for nearly 2 years, beginning in 1990, no one could buy a Game Genie, no matter how badly they sucked at Battletoads.
Okay. Oh, come on! I did the jump!
Honestly, the players should sue Nintendo for emotional distress. Luckily, the court later found that the Game Genie counted as fair use and that it wasn't affecting demand for Nintendo games, so Galoob and Codemasters were allowed to keep selling it. And just to rub it in, they made Game Genie cartridges for the Nintendo SNES and Game Boy too.
It's here! Game Genie now for your Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, get more power, live forever on your Super NES. You can even turn Game Genie's power up and on as you play. So get up, get out, get it now! Game Genie now available for your Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
And so finally everybody could finish Battletoads. Except it was 1992, which was when Super Mario Kart came out, so nobody cared.
Fan-made games are always a bit of a grey area, but the general rule of thumb is that as long as you aren't trying to make money off them and aren't making anything offensive, you might be able to avoid the wrath of big publishers. So that's Super Andy O'Bros off the table. Hugely offensive.
Hey.
That was the logic that spurred on Relic Castle, a repository set up in 2014 to catalogue fan-made Pokemon games, complete with a forum dedicated to fans of these homebrew spin-offs. For nearly a decade, Relic Castle claimed to offer a non-profit, ad-free, tight-knit community, one that eventually ended up with over 20,000 members and hundreds of fan games in its listings. Earlier this year, however, just before Relic Castle's 10th birthday, Nintendo stepped in with a couple of Gengar lawyers and got them to perform Dream Eater on the site. Or something. The point is, following a DMCA notice, the site is now no more, meaning anyone looking for Pokemon fan games will now have to, well, they'll just have to Google Pokemon fan games. And hope that they get there before Nintendo does. Better Google fast.
Back in 1984, Atari was split into two separate companies, Atari Corporation and Atari Games. Atari Corporation owned the rights to the Atari brand for computer and console games, while Atari Games only focused on arcade games. Eventually, Atari Games decided it wanted to get involved in making console games too, but because it wasn't allowed to use the Atari name for anything other than arcade games, it created a new company called Tengen, and got to work on making games for Nintendo's NES console. Among these was Tengen's 1989 release of Tetris on the NES. So that's Tetris, but not as you know it. When Nintendo announced that they had the worldwide exclusive rights to Tetris, Tengen claimed they already had the rights from Microsoft, who'd released a home computer version of Tetris a year earlier. The debate went to court and Elorg, the Russian rights owner of Tetris, backed Nintendo. As a result, Tengen had to recall more than 250,000 copies of its NES Tetris after only selling around 50,000. Here's the worst bit. Although Nintendo's own NES version of Tetris became popular and well respected and is still used today for tournaments, most people who played both versions at the time agreed that Tengen's Tetris was a much better game, mainly because it had a two-player mode, while Nintendo's version didn't. And also these tiny Cossack dances, which apparently took up half the graphics space on the cartridge. Totally worth it.
Look on Spotify, YouTube, or any number of other music streaming services, and you'll find a bunch of official video game soundtracks shared by their respective game publishers. This is generally agreed to be a good thing. How am I supposed to drive to my local supermarket without the synthy stylings of the Outrun soundtrack? I'd rather starve. Not every game publisher decides to release its music through these services, however, and the most notable of these exceptions is Nintendo, which stubbornly refuses to bring its music to music platforms like Spotify, Deezer, Tidal, AudioSquirt, Jukes, Tunebox, or Boomplay, and I only made up 2 of those. Because Nintendo makes some of the most famous and well-loved game music on the planet, some people have taken to sharing it on YouTube. In response, Nintendo has been insisting these videos and sometimes even entire YouTube channels are taken down. To be totally clear, Nintendo is well within its rights to do this. It owns the copyright to the music from its games, so if people are just going to share that music on YouTube, often making money off ad revenue as a result, Nintendo is absolutely allowed to pull those videos and channels down. The problem with it is, Nintendo is not offering a legitimate alternative, meaning the only legal way to access many Nintendo soundtracks is to buy CDs from Japan or, of course, carry a Nintendo console around with a portable power supply, a television, and the game constantly running. So that's why the GameCube had a carrying handle. Oh, I always wondered. The situation is best summed up by YouTuber Deoxys Prime, who has more than 220,000 subscribers and used to have a load of Nintendo soundtracks before over 500 copyright claims were made, forcing them to take down all their Nintendo music in 2022. Best of luck to anyone still holding out having Nintendo music on YouTube, they said at the time. So many of those soundtracks have never gotten official releases. Be respectful of their right to do this, but also please continue to push Nintendo to release their music in official formats, because there's no reason these soundtracks should have to disappear forever. So I guess I'm off to Japan. Can I bring you back anything? Maybe a copy of The Boy and His Blob OST? No?
Think of all the mature, responsible things you could be doing. Helping old ladies cross the street, proudly maintaining your yard, hanging with your folks, or cleaning your room. But get real, you'd rather be playing video games. You can rent them from Blockbuster. They've got more of the coolest new Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Sega Genesis games for rent than anyone in the world. So dudes, why not get your games with Blockbuster? It's the mature thing to do.
Before the days when you had to personally give Jeff Bezos $20 to rent a movie, you could go down to a magical wonderland full of faded copies of Robin Hood Prince of Thieves called Blockbuster Video and borrow one of theirs. And in the days before Xbox Game Pass and PlayStation Plus subscriptions, if we wanted to try a new game without committing to the full price, you could also rent games from Blockbuster, where you paid a few quid to play it for a couple of days before physically taking it back to the shop. Jeff Bezos wasn't involved at all. I know! Someone who wasn't on board with this marvelous game rental system was, you guessed it, Nintendo, who felt that after all the time it spends making each game, the least it deserved was people forking over full price to play them. Because in the early days some rental stores were renting out non-gaming computer software too, Nintendo teamed up with the Software Publishers Association, Microsoft, and word processor developer WordPerfect to lobby Congress to make software rental illegal. Imagine your dad coming home from Blockbuster with a copy of WordPerfect. Worst movie night ever. A compromise was offered by the Video Software Dealers Association, who said, "We'll agree to stop renting out non-gaming computer software as long as you let us keep renting out game cartridges." They probably threw in a few VHS copies of Jurassic Park too, sweeten the deal. So the deal was done and Nintendo was left without a legal leg to stand on. Video game rentals were legal.
You can try it before you buy it. Blockbuster!
Are you giving up?
But don't doubt Nintendo's commitment to ruining your fun. In petty retaliation, Nintendo then sued Blockbuster for photocopying its game manuals, which resulted in Blockbuster agreeing to make their own manuals instead. So gamers might have retained the ability to borrow copies of Nintendo video games, but they had to suffer with a off-brand, knockoff, legally approved game manual. Somehow I think they managed.
Check out the whole new game section at Blockbuster. Now you can rent, buy, and game your way.
Sweet, we're closing early.
Yeah, Andy, the Super Andy-O brothers, I think we've already got an email from Nintendo. Yeah.
What is their problem?
I know. I think maybe you've got rid of the Tash. Maybe that's enough of a differential.
What? They can make games about me if they want.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Nintendo. Why? Yeah, do that. Make an Andy. Yeah. Make an Andy game. But yeah, can you think, folks watching at home, of any other cool Nintendo things that you didn't get because Nintendo were like, no to the creatives because they didn't get the rights, but like it would have been cool. Maybe Nintendo could have just been like, hey, let's do something. I like that idea. Let's make it official. Why don't you do that more, Nintendo? Make it official. Official Nintendo seal. Bing. Do that. Yeah? But things that have definitely not got the official Nintendo seal are these videos from Outside Xbox and Outside Xtra. You can go check them out. We talk about other things as well as Nintendo. We talk about Xbox and PlayStation and all that jazz. Yeah, Nintendo, we're gonna tell people about other games companies. Ooh, you gonna get us? Please don't get us. We're sorry.